Good evening. Welcome to the Village Board of Trustees Workshop Budget Meeting. Today's April 22nd, 2021. It's now 7:10 p.m. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, and let us remain standing once again, and as we always do, think about our troops serving our country. Thank you. Can you have a seat? Okay, roll call vote. Trustee Alpert. He has to unmute. You can't unmute.
1 second, we'll see what we can do about that, Mayor.
Okay.
Visiting hours.
That last sheet.
What?
I think I'm unmuted.
I'm unmuted.
Yeah, I'm trying to help. I can't get
Trying to
Joe.
get present.
Okay, present. All right, Trustee Barone.
Present.
Trustee Corrigan.
Present.
Trustee Sauberman.
Present. The surgery.
Great. All right, thank you. Next workshop meeting is Monday, April 26th at 7 p.m.
Tomorrow.
The next budget meeting is scheduled for April 29th to adopt the 2021-22 budget. And the next regular meeting is scheduled for Monday, May 3rd at 7 p.m. Okay, Mr. Genito, if you would like to provide an overview once again for the board.
Yes, Mayor. We have the budget that there was a number of changes that were suggested at the last meeting, and the board has been redistributed a revised general fund and water fund, which were the main ones that were affected, as well as the curbside and container solid waste district. The summary of it all is that the tax rate increase is now down to 3.4%. And I know of great interest to the board is where they are with the tax cap. And at this moment, the budget would have to be reduced, or the tax levy, I should say, would have to be reduced another 14,447 to be below the tax cap. So those were the changes. As you know, Mr. Sawicki made a number of changes in the Public Works Department. Some of those changes involved the general fund, street department predominantly, snow removal, as well as the solid waste districts. And those solid waste districts, of course, don't affect the tax rate. They affect the solid waste rates for the curbside and the water fund. So the water fund, again, doesn't affect the tax rate. It does affect the water rates, but it didn't have any impact on the water rates. There's still $2 below for the average household for the year.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Trustees, do we have any additional recommendations to the budget?
Well, I think we all talked about the two officers and, well, one officer, one detective retiring with, they say May 31st is what they're requesting. And then we had talked about, let's be safer than not safe, and do 6 months, and we got those numbers.
Michael, could you elaborate on that reduction on the two offices and the cost, the impact to us for the retirement of the two offices and potentially hiring two new offices and only budgeting half the amount of the higher salaried offices?
Yes, Mayor. As the board is aware, in the past, when the question has come up that there is a potential retirement that's going to be coming up at some point in time, either this year or within the next budget year. The question always is, can we do something like provide in the budget for a savings when these individuals do retire, which have longevities with the village. And of course, you then, even though there are promotions, some people come in at a lower pay scale because you're hiring brand new people. And so can we reflect those savings in a budget amendment here? My position on this has always been that you really don't know if the person is going to retire, despite the assurances that you may have that they are going to retire when they say they're going to retire. I started my career in government in 1984. I can tell you that there were many times, not just a few, but many times when somebody literally put their papers into the retirement system and then pulled them, and they can do that the day before they were going to retire and decide to stay on. In fact, the village of Suffern last year, when we were preparing our budget, this was a question that came up about a particular employee that was going to be retiring. And could we then adjust the budget to reflect the savings? The person was supposed to retire in August. They didn't retire until about a month ago. So if we had provided for those savings in the budget, we would have been short the funds and would have had to find another way to make up that money in the budget. So that's the only caution that I do give the board. There is a great insistence that these two people will be retiring, and they will be retiring sometime between May and June of this year. And let's try to be safe about it and say, give it 6 months. Definitely they'll retire within then. But again, the position is that nobody is going to retire until they actually do. And anything could change in somebody's life that would make them decide not to retire if they don't have to retire.
Okay.
Okay, so I just have one question to that. So say we take, because I think, Mike, you had sent out a number, it was around about $67,000.
Yes.
So, and keeping in mind the 6 months, not the full year. So if we take and do the $67,000 and they do retire, which I think Chief had mentioned they were looking to go actually May 31st, what happens to that money?
If they do retire and we had budgeted more,
Correct.
well, then there would be more money in the budget than we would have anticipated that we needed. And that money would then, at the end of the year, if everything else remained equal, would fall to fund balance, would increase the fund balance.
Okay.
Would we be able to calculate that cost if they did potentially retire in May or June? Any additional payout that would be necessary to be in the budget?
That was in the number, wasn't it?
It was. Mike, I just want to chime in. I can't.
I'm asking
unmute my
Mike, I
video.
just want to make sure that was correct.
Yes, it would be approximately twice the number that the 67,000, because if they were to have left in May, then you would save for the whole year, not just half. I mean, we could rework the number and recalculate it and so forth. You know, the main savings that you get is that the people that retired had longevity payments that were getting to them, and that's where your savings would be. Because don't forget, you would promote people up into those positions typically as they vacate them, and then you're hiring at the starting level pay for a brand new police officer. One of the costs that offsets that is that we pay for medical benefits in retirement, and we would pay for the medical benefits of the new people coming on board. So that's why there's a bit of a offset, not exactly an equal amount that you're going to save for the whole of the salary.
Right, okay.
Mike, I cannot turn on my video. It says that the host has locked me out. So I disappeared for a second to pick something up, and I couldn't come back.
All right, let me see.
Sorry about the ringing there. Turn that off.
You should be a co-host.
Okay. Let's see. I'll check now. Now I can do it. Thank you.
Okay,
Yeah.
you're welcome.
I couldn't a minute ago.
So the number that you gave us, Mike, is the 6 month with all of those variables put into it, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Did we lose the mayor?
Let me see.
Oh, no. There. All of a sudden, you were just a black chair, and I didn't know what happened to you.
I was just going to get a piece of paper, that's all. Okay, do we have any further questions?
We,
Are you saying something, Mr. Albert?
oh, not yet.
Okay. If you would like to, go ahead. Does anyone else have any other questions?
I do want to discuss the two police cars.
Okay, let's discuss that.
I have heard that Clerk in past years never asked for two cars really, and it's an awful lot of money. So I was thinking, since the chief didn't give us any other cuts in any other areas, for us to get down below the 2%, I think we should limit that to just one car.
All right, just give me one second. I'm just pulling up another document. Hold on, guys.
Okay.
I did send that email. Did you guys receive the email that I did
Yeah.
send out?
Yeah.
Okay. So those are my concerns to, in regards to the police cars. That the
Right.
need and necessity is there to provide the proper tools to the police officers out on patrol, and also provide them a safe working environment in their radio car. Also to be able to provide that quick, essential response time with reliable equipment and needs of new police cars is something that I feel is absolutely necessary.
Mayor, the police currently have 19 vehicles.
Okay?
19.
Yes.
Okay, it is my opinion that at least some of those vehicles are being kept on hand as a point to them and say, hey, look how old this is.
Right.
Mayor, I just want to make a quick announcement that the fire department has requested if there's any questions for them to address them early in the meeting because they have to be to another appointment at 8 p.m.
Okay. All right. So right after this, that's fine. So going back to the patrol cars with the operational cars of 5 administrative cars, 6 patrol cars, and 2 spare cars, that puts us at 13 vehicles, 3 special purpose cars, and 1 trailer. That's 11, 12, 13, 16, 17.
There's actually 19 vehicles on the books right now on the police.
Okay, if the chief is on, quote, 19 vehicles.
19. There's a Hummer. I don't know why we have a Hummer.
Well,
I can't even imagine what the insurance on that Hummer is each year.
Chief Loughlin, if you wish, you can turn your video and audio on.
Okay, I wasn't able to. I was just able to come on now. Okay, so as far as the police cars, we have 2 vehicles right now that should already be surplus. They're not being used. They can't be used. They're basically worthless to us, which brings us down to, you're saying we have 19, that would bring us down to 17. One of the 19 that you are referring to is a trailer, not a vehicle. So that brings us down to 16. What we need to operate every day is as follows. We need 5 unmarked vehicles. There's 1 per administrator, that's 3, and 2 for detectives, that's 5. We need 6 patrol vehicles to cover the staffing of the actual road, and 2 spare vehicles. That's what we need to operate every day. So that's 13 vehicles. We then have the 3 special purpose vehicles, which are the Dare truck, the Humvee, and the Dare Corvette. Those are not used on a regular basis. They're not used every day. The Humvee, it's, again, there's no cost to the village to own that. We don't actually own it. It's was given to us by the Military Surplus 1033 program. There's no cost to own that. We don't owe any payments on it. If the board chose to get rid of that, we could give that back to the Military Surplus program, and they could give it out to another police department. The only thing I will say about the Dare truck is it is useful. It's used for Dare. It can also be used to transport equipment for us, cones, barricades, be used in inclement weather. So as far as everyday operations, we need at least 13 vehicles, 11 and the 2 spares. I can tell you for the movie shoot yesterday, every single one of our working vehicles was out on the road.
That's the needs and necessities of the police department. That's what it is. We need to keep that fleet up and running, 100 fully up and running, without worrying about cars breaking down and being repaired. The cost of repairs to a 2009, a 2010, 2011 will just keep continuing throughout the years while we can purchase 2 new vehicles with a maintenance plan and not be burdened with additional money to make repairs to vehicles. So with the money to the repairs plus the manpower, I believe it's more cost effective to purchase 2 new vehicles.
Just to make the board aware, I had to drive one of the older Crown Victorias for the last couple of days because my car was at Ford. That car needs a transmission. I spoke to Supervisor Hunt this morning. The transmission on that vehicle will be between $2,500 and $4,000. The Kelly Blue Book value of that car is $1,600. So to put a transmission in the car that's worth twice of what the car is worth, it just doesn't make sense. I can't speak for what was asked for in the past. I don't know that, but I did send you all the documentation. Many of our cars have what's equal to over 500,000 miles on them. So if we don't get on a regular replacement cycle with these cars, all we're doing is kicking the can down the road. If we get 1 car this year, we're going to be looking at replacing 3 and 4 cars next year. It just doesn't make sense to me to continue to kick this can down the road.
The board is
This to me is the worst actual part of my budget to cut.
the village board has to look out for the residents of this village. That is our job. We are elected by the residents of this village to keep things affordable here. And over the last 10 years, the largest increase source in the budget over the last 10 years has been the police force. Now, I'm not saying that that's necessarily a bad thing, meaning to say the residents are safer for it, very likely. However, it's also to say that we have to put in place a plan where if you look over the last 10 years, you didn't get a car every year. You got a car here, you got a car there. You didn't get a car every year.
That's why we're in this position, Trustee Alpert.
Let me finish what I'm saying, sir. We are willing as a board to commit to 1 car every year going forward. And we think that you should be able to make that work.
Well, I can just tell you that at 13 vehicles, and feel free to do your research, police cars on a whole throughout the country do not last for 13 years. So to replace 1 car every year, it's just not going to be, it's not fiscally responsible. Also, speaking to Supervisor Hunt this morning, he had advised me to bring all of our cars up to speed, to get them all safe, to get them all in tip-top working condition like you suggested. He suggested that I ask for $75,000 to $100,000 to get the cars up to speed. So to me, replacing those 2 cars, having a 5-year warranty on them that we have to put no maintenance into makes more sense to me than it would be to put $75,000 into repairing these cars. And there's still old cars that are going to have to replace in the coming years. I can only tell you what the numbers are and what I feel the need are. Ultimately, it's a board decision, but I can tell you that if we replace 1 car this year instead of 2 cars, we're kicking the can down the road, and next year we're going to be in the same position. That's all I can say to that.
And let's just let me add to that. You said that we're responsible to the village residents and the taxpayers. You're absolutely correct, but we do also have a responsibility to the police officers in the police department for their safety in their work environment and also for the safety of the residents at the same time.
Absolutely.
Committing to, you made the statement, the board is committing or ready to commit to a car a year. I'm committed to giving or authorizing in the budget what the needs and necessities are to keep our residents safe and our police officers safe on patrol.
Mhm.
And that right now, this year is 2 cars. Getting onto a replacement plan for all our vehicles within the village, police, fire, and DPW, that's definitely a plan, a long-term plan that we need to develop to have that replacement plan in place.
Chief, I provided a lengthy list of items to you, which I believe you did respond to, that have, I thought big increases over actual amounts that were spent, for instance, over the last 12 months or over the last 5 years, looking back. So trends, basically certain trends. And basically what came back to me was not a single dime off your budget. Another department, specifically the DPW department, was willing to make significant cuts to their budget lines to help the budget and help the residents. I'd like to see your department do the same, sir.
So Trustee Alpert, I believe I addressed that on that email. This is my first year with the police department budget. So prior to this, I have no budget experience for the police department. I base my budget on what was allocated in the past. It's tough for me to see what money is actually spent this year because this was an odd year with COVID. I understand this is the board's final decision, but I'm not comfortable making, cuts in places where I don't have a year of budget experience under my belt.
Sure.
So if I were to say, yes, cut this money out of this line, cut this money out of that line, basing it on the numbers that I'm seeing this year with COVID, what happens in the coming year is if business gets back to normal when we're out of money in those lines. Again, I'm not saying I'm not willing to make cuts, but I don't have the budget experience to tell you, yes, I know I'm okay with this amount. I know I'm okay with that amount.
As trustees, as I said, and as the mayor reiterated, we are here to protect the residents. And the bottom line is, if you can't make the cuts, we will make them for you. And I want to make that
Understood.
clear.
Understood.
And we would prefer that you make the cuts because we don't want to be the bad guys.
So
We
you
want to
want me
encourage
to
you
make,
to find.
so you want me to make an uneducated decision to be the bad guy? I'm not understanding what you're saying. I'm telling you that I don't have the budget experience under my belt to tell you, yeah, in the last 5 years in my budget, I haven't spent this. This was an odd year with COVID. I can't tell you, yeah, I'm not going to need this money next year. I don't have the budget experience to do that.
Let me just chime in also, just that, Chief, as you know, as we all know, this is Chief's first year of undertaking a budget. This is Chief's first year of actually running the police department. This is where he's going to gain the experience and knowledge that he needs to run his department, taking into consideration police reform, bail reform, discovery reform, and everything else that has been coupled with COVID and police reform right now. Is very challenging, and that would be very challenging for any chief.
Yes, and there's no disagreement there, but we have a large tax roll going in front of us, and we want to keep, first of all, there is no one on this board or in this village that would ever compromise one police officer and or one resident. So let's just take that off the table to start with. This board and anyone in this village would never, ever want to cause harm or hurt someone in the police department or a resident. So let's just take that off the table, because that's been said a lot. And you're kind of saying that people are not caring, and that is not true. That is not what this board was elected to do. And that's not what this board ever intends to do. So let's just keep that in mind and keep focused at the task at hand. And the task at hand is to make sure that we are right-sizing this budget and making sure that everyone is safe and doing the right thing. So enough with we're putting people at harm, and that we're being irresponsible. Because no one does this and ever wants to do it irresponsibly. So let's do that for number one. And if there's no other cuts that can be figured out, which is fine. And honestly, I do believe that one car is sufficient for this year. And with the commitment of another car every other year,
No,
as
every,
long,
a new car every year.
Every year.
yeah,
Not every
I'm
other.
sorry, every year. Yes, my bad. I'm sorry. I'm getting a little, but you just can't tax, we just can't keep raising the taxes higher and higher and higher. People are leaving. They can't afford to be here anymore. And whatever we can do to keep our residents and our police officers safe. And if you're saying one car is going to cripple this village, it just kind of, I think we should do one car. That is my thought. That is my thinking. I don't know how the rest of the board feels. Let's see what we can do with the numbers. We've got to keep our residents safe, our police department safe. And if another car makes that much of a difference for everyone's safety, I'm not understanding why that is. And I'm sorry. It just, I'm not sorry. It's just, it doesn't make sense.
With the police officers driving around in vehicles from 2006, 2007, 2008, it makes sense to me.
They're not driving them on an everyday basis, Ed. They're using them for movies.
That's
When
not
we
correct,
don't
trustee
have-
Corrigan.
No,
That is not correct. That is not correct.
Six of the cars currently are 2017 or newer vehicles, based on my count. And if we buy another car, that would be 7. Okay, so we're really only talking a few cars that are a little bit older, like 2013, something like that.
So the 2017 vehicles that you're referring to, the mileage with the engine hours put them over 300,000 miles.
If the car is maintained correctly, I do not believe that's an issue.
I can just tell you, this is what I think that we need. If the board goes with one car, I understand, but I can just tell you that there's going to be repair costs to keep the cars going.
Okay, well, we also don't want to push taxpayers out of this village. And we're at that turning point right now.
Understood, but
And I don't think one car is going to take our police department down to their knees. I mean, I am pretty sure DPW is more than qualified and will take care of every need that has to happen. I just don't.
at a higher
Well, like I-
cost.
as I-
Higher cost.
as I stated earlier, I did speak to the DPW
At a
supervisor
higher
today,
cost.
and he's advised me that we are going to need quite a bit more money for repairs to bring the current fleet to properly operating safe police cars. So the number that he gave me was $75,000 to $100,000. I'm just passing that information on to you. And I know he's on the meeting tonight if you wanted to speak to him about it directly. But I could tell you that that is the cost of the two vehicles. So
How
to me,
much-
I don't understand why we're spending the money to repair old vehicles when
How
we
much-
could have new vehicles that are warranted that there's no repair cost to.
For the
How
same,
much
for the
money is
same
left in the
cost.
budget? How much money is left in the repair budget for this year? We still have another month and a half left in the current fiscal year. And if we can do a lot of those repairs now, they will not impact next year's budget. And I
I
think.
can
the
tell you there's
vehicles
not
should be repaired.
75, I can tell you there's not 75 to $100,000 in there.
What is it?
There's $100,000 contingency that has not even been touched. The point is, we have, I'd say, I haven't added it up, so I'm speaking off the top of my head, but I found tens and tens and tens of thousands of dollars in various budget lines that were not spent year to date relative to the amount that was budgeted for them in the current budget, in the police contract, in the police areas, as well as other departmental areas. And an example of that is the contingency. The point is, we have money in the budget that's unspent from the current year. I would like to see the money from the current budget used to bring our cars up to snuff 100%, so that you cannot say that there's a single issue with any vehicle that you drive in this village. And then moving forward, we should have a fleet that we can properly maintain and replace one car a year and move forward. I think that that's sufficient. And that's what the board is willing to accommodate.
Understood.
Board, Joe Hunt is on the line if he does want to provide any advice to the board on the maintenance of the vehicles.
Okay,
You guys hear me?
We hear you just fine, Joe.
All right. I'm going to put my 2 cents in, being a certified mechanic for over 40 years and a 22-year automotive instructor. A police vehicle does run 3 shifts, so that's 3 times the amount of any other car. Maintaining the vehicle on a police side is a little bit different than maintaining a regular automotive. Again, we don't get to see them all the time because they're from one shift to the next, but when we do get to see them, we do go through them. Maintenance of a police vehicle, when you do an oil change at 3,000 miles normally on a normal car, they're up to 15,000 miles when we're doing an oil change because of the hours. On top of that, if you look at the history of the car from buying it brand new, from the date of in service, that means when it's delivered to the dealer, the warranty starts. We put extended warranties on this car to keep the maintenance and the major repairs down. So that way, when they come out within 4 to 5 years of warranty, then it's all the DPW for repairing. The cost of repairs are going up drastically because of the situation with COVID and supply and demand and transportation and oils. On top of that, again, we do have some vehicles like the chief and the board have been talking about that are in service for management, the lieutenants and the detectives that have been pulled out of street service, painted and put into active service for their needs. We do have 3 or 4 cars that are still left under warranty for major repairs, but 2 of them are coming close. And I think the 2 new ones is 472 and the chief's car are the only ones that really have a bumper to bumper left on them. So when it comes to overall the picture and the use of these vehicles, in my opinion, and in my opinion only, it is going to be harder to maintain and bring these older cars, especially the Crown Vics, up to par with the age and the mileage on them. We can do it, but the cost factor, like when I had my discussion with Chief Loughlin, is going to be costly because right now we have a Crown Vic with a fuel tank that's rusted. We got a complaint or a concern or a complaint about smell of fuel. When we smoke tested it with a $1,600 tool to verify there was a problem, we found it was rusted. On top of the tank being rusted, straps and the lines now. The cost factor to repair just that is going to be $1,200 or $1,300, but the car still has like 90-something thousand miles on it. So we recently serviced it about 3 months ago with spark plugs, valve cover gaskets. So what I'm trying to say is that the older the car and the longer in service date, there's more to the picture, and you fix one, then it's just a downflow. And because these cars are used 9 times out of 10 around the clock, meaning 3 shifts, it's not like a normal maintenance for our personal cars. Again, through the strategies of me being a mechanic into the supervisor stage, looking at government contracting and going outsourcing prices to get better prices on oils, tires, brake pads, buying bulk to stock and get cheaper costs, I still cannot really say that I can bring a maintenance cost factor down on some of these older vehicles to bring them back up to 100%. I can say they're at 100%, but like the chief said, he took a vehicle home. We drove it around here. It was fine. But after driving for a certain amount of time or mileage, the tranny started slipping. Cold, it's good, slipping. So we didn't get to catch that in a snapshot while we drove it, but he drove it. So he was the test pilot for us. For us to spend 20 minutes to an hour test driving a car that doesn't have a complaint that came down for minor service, and then they take them home. You know, again, I'm not God. I can't foresee the future of each car, but I'm telling you, some of these cars have sat for a while in between special functions. And when they do have to jump start them and get in them, they do hear ticking noises and things do happen. Again, we can't prevent. So my theory, if you buy a new car with the maintenance warranty, we have a window of just oil changes, tires, and brakes for up to 5 years. And once we're at it at 5 years, if that car is still in good shape, that should be off on govdeals.com, and that money should be put back into the funds. I have a couple cars here that we've been trying to get to and put on GovDeals to help subsidize the buying process, but I'm one man, and I've had a lot of department heads put a lot of stuff on me on different projects, so I just haven't been able to stay in the office. But in the end game, if we don't really look at the big picture with maintenance, new vehicles, we're just going to be in kind of the same boat. Do you really want to put 50, 55,000 to 75,000 into 3 vehicles when you can buy 2? And I'm not telling you boards what to do. I'm just giving you my professional opinion.
Thank you,
It's my
George.
opinion only.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Is there anyone else?
You're muted, Mayor.
Okay. Is there anyone else in regards to the police department? Okay. I know that Chief Kaufer needed to come on. Does anyone have any questions for Chief Kaufer in the fire department?
Nope.
Thank you for
Okay.
your service.
Very thankful to have you, yes.
Thank you, Chief.
You're welcome. My video is shut down, so I can't.
Okay, do you have any
There we go.
discussion with the board?
No, as long as they have no questions for me.
No, I don't.
Have a safe night, Jeremy. Keep
Thank you.
everybody safe.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy.
You're welcome.
Okay, we implemented the budget cuts for the street department and the DPW as Mr. Genito indicated. Is there any questions in regards to that? Any additional questions? Okay,
The board would like to propose making cuts across the board on a number of the things that I presented. I think if we take 5% from each of those departments, each of those groups, other than DPW, who already put in cuts, I think that will help quite a lot.
which departments are those?
I submitted an Excel spreadsheet, which I read quite a bit of at the last meeting on the budget. And I think we can make across the board 5% without having, it would be a negligible effect, and yet it would have substantial effect on taxpayers. Do the other trustees agree? We haven't discussed this.
So,
I have to print that out. Can you find that for me?
who?
We'd also like to discuss the contingency.
Who's finding it for you? You're on mute, Ed.
Yeah,
Okay. Who's
Go ahead.
finding? Did you want me to send it to you?
no, I have to pull it out of the computer.
Oh, okay.
We'd also like to discuss the contingency. Last year, we had a $100,000 contingency. So far, 0 has been spent of this contingency. This is roughly almost 1% of the budget right there that we had last year. This year, the proposal is 2%, which is nearly 2% of the budget in a contingency that in theory we spent zero on this past year. That's money that's just going straight to the fund balance. Personally, I think, we should calculate in what it will cost if we do have a new police contract, what sort of costs would be associated with that, and add that to the same 100,000 we had last year and leave it at that. So if that cost, I'm just going to make up a number. This is not from any valid number. I'm just throwing it out there. If that number is $50,000, then I think our contingency should be 150. So the 100 we had last year plus the 50 to cover any additional police costs if there's a new contract that would affect that. But other than that, I don't see a need for a $200,000 contingency when we spent zero in this past budget year. Again, I think the contingency is a large burden on taxpayers who are leaving this village in mass. I point to the fact that real estate in Suffern in general is much lower than the rest of Rockland County. You compare it to other towns like Clarkstown, for instance, New City. Homes there, similar homes to the ones here in Suffern, are selling at twice the price. And the reason the village homes here in Suffern are so cheap comparatively to other homes in Rockland County is because the tax burden is so high. It makes it less desirable. And I believe personally that my job, and the reason that I ran for trustee 3 years ago initially, and the reason I'm still a trustee, thankfully the public sees that I'm trying to help them, is I think we need to lower taxes, not raise taxes. I mean, my ideal circumstance, my ideal budget would have a 0% tax increase. But I'm willing to come in below the cap, but I'm not willing to go 1 penny more. Does anyone else have any comments? Charlie? Joe? Brad?
I'm willing to go below the cap. I'm not going to be willing to go 1 penny above the cap, but I think if we commit to 1 new police car a year, that gets us below the cap.
I do think that we have a couple of more things to look at. This isn't going to be our final, and I understand that we can communicate on, and Rob, I think you can advise on this, that we can communicate via email. I have a lot of feedback. I'm really sorry. I couldn't get on my computer and my iPad. That we can communicate via email to sort of finite the numbers to what we need to do, and Mike Genito as well, your thoughts, so that we can talk about all this tonight. And I'm not sure that the fire department needs a 5%. We kind of took a lot out of them last year. We haven't really reviewed salaries. So there's a couple of other things that, we just need to look at, review. I like the 5% cut on where we can do the 5% cut. And, I just think that we have a little more wiggle room so that we can save all of our taxpayers a bit more money. And Steve came up with some great ideas, and they are definitely strong, and we should do that.
I do want to just chime in. When I say it's a 5% cut, it's not a 5% cut off previous spending. In fact, it's a vast increase off previous spending, because the only things I flagged were items that were up like 20, 30, 40% compared to last year.
Right.
So basically cutting 5% should have a negligible effect on any actual programs that we offer, any services. So I want to be clear about that. 5% doesn't return them to zero, a 0% increase or something year over year. I'd only flagged when I made that list that I read on the Zoom 2 weeks ago. It was a very large list of items that seem to have unsubstantiated increases, either increases where we increased them maybe last year and then didn't spend them down this year, during the budget, or increases this year compared to last year. And again, we didn't, spend that kind of money in the last bunch of years. So I was just looking at historical trends, and that's all.
Right.
I would just like to comment on whether or not the final decisions are going to be made tonight as we had planned. the big concern I have about not making final decisions tonight is that I can take those decisions you make, process them through, and it takes a lot of work to do that. I have to go through the system that we have, input all of the changes, process those changes through the document, which doesn't get generated by our system. That's something we actually do in Excel. And then I in turn, after checking those numbers, go to our assessor and have him run basically the numbers against the assessed valuation that he has given me to ensure that the tax rate, the curbside and the container solid waste rates are correct. And as well, my staff checks other numbers as well. Now, imagine we have tonight, and then I have to get to work on everything tomorrow to make sure all those numbers are in and all that's processed between tomorrow and next week in order to provide for you by next Thursday a finalized document that I have confidence in, that has been fully vetted, proofed, and we're not going to get any surprises once you adopt that budget, plus preparing the budget resolutions, the adoption resolutions. So I just want everyone to understand how much goes into it, and that while it sounds convenient to be able to go back and forth with emails and decisions, I then have to have that consensus of the board at some point in time, which you know from experience doesn't happen necessarily overnight. So I'm just cautioning the board, if you're going to delay making final decisions tonight into a future date, it's just going to jeopardize the quality of the document. I'll say one last thing about this. Last year, when we went through this budget process, I had the same concerns and mentioned those to the board. And even though that was done, subsequent to decision night, there were many things that went back and forth to make final changes in the budget. And I cautioned the board at that time that we were going to run into problems with some of these lines because they were too low from what I could see from my experience. I can't tell the department that they are too low or too high if they tell me that they're going to be within this budget. And departments came forward with cuts that they believed they could stick with. We adopted the budget. Our fiscal year went into effect June 1. And by July, I was getting requests from departments to move money around their budget for lines they couldn't cover. And that was in the year of COVID, when we should have had not as many expenditures. So it's just the concern I have in making sure that this work gets done appropriately for you. And don't forget, basically the budget is put together by myself and one other person in my office in order to run these things through. We don't have a staff of people to put it all together and proof it all through.
So Mr. Genito, just to chime in a little bit on follow up on your statement there, that things had to be moved around. Would it be fair to say that even if a few things might have been under, maybe they were under budgeted and so forth, had to be moved around, as a whole, the budget that the board agreed on last year, granted it was 11th hour agreement, would you agree that the budget ended up this, what's expected at least by May 31st of this year to be some surpluses? In other words, I believe that your fund balance is going to be higher as of May 31st.
Yes, it should be marginally higher. Yes. And that's all assuming that through April and May, when April we're halfway through, and May, we don't get any other surprises.
Of course, without any surprises. I'm saying with no surprises, with trends as they've been, we're going to end the year with a surplus. So I do want to just sort of take off. I don't know what the right word I'm looking for is, but I'm not meaning any disrespect, but by and large, I think our budget generally has a sufficient bottom line. And maybe there's a few items here or there that might not have been properly predicted, by us, or whatever. But having said that, I think by and large, there's enough wiggle room in the budget to move a line here or there, and not an excessive number, but like a handful.
My point is not that you want to cut the budget or that you feel that the budget lines can be moved around to fix those that are a little short. My concern is that the final decisions were to be made tonight that allows me then to process those changes through the budget to ensure that when we set the tax rate is what it should be.
Sure. I'm prepared to do that. I'm hoping that the other trustees are as well. I am.
The only thing I have to say, Steve, is that I know the radios for the fire department are super important. And if we don't get those done, it's going to cost us so much more than if we don't.
Okay.
And I do think that the radios for the fire department are,
Okay.
okay, so that is not something I think we should give up on. So perhaps we go tonight with the two salaries for the police department. And we go for one car for the police department. How does everybody feel about that?
Fine. So you're talking about, Joe, you're talking about 6 months versus a year for the two that are retiring?
Correct.
Keep in mind that there's a good chance, and just for the public's benefit, to be clear, in case anyone joined this broadcast late, there's two senior officers retiring that will be replaced by new employees at much lower rate. And they're planning currently to retire May 31st, which is actually the current budget year. But we are still proposing to budget 6 months of their higher salaries into next year, just in case they don't retire on time. And that's what we're talking about right now, is in the budget, tentative budget right now, it shows them in for the whole year. But if they're retiring May 31st, they wouldn't be in at all. However, we're sort of compromising the difference down the middle, saying 6 months is, we feel safe.
Joe, I'm happy with your plan.
And then I think, I'm sorry, Mike, for this, but barring the fire department, which I think is important, I think that we should look at some of the other things, Mike, if that's not too much of a trouble, and we will get those ideas to you no later than Monday. And then via email, we will all decide whether we're okay with them or not okay. Does that work for the rest of the board?
Well,
Mike, does that work for you?
can you hear me?
We hear you,
Yeah.
Fred.
All right, I would like to say I did my complete, what he needs. And Steve's suggestion of a 5% is only on the list that he gave already to the board and to Mike. So the 5% does not really impact very much at all the money that the fire department needs for radios. As a generality, in other words, I like Steve's suggestion of a 5% cut in all those categories that Steve gave to Mike. And I think we should tonight vote and say yes on that so that Mike has the time he needs to properly prepare us a budget for the next meeting.
But I would like to have till Monday.
I know from my experience, when you start to run board meetings by email, it gets very confusing and it winds up almost catastrophic when you try to do things by email on Monday. I've seen that from experience.
And if I know, Joe, you had asked me to chime in earlier. In terms of the open meetings law, obviously board members can speak to each other, independently and on their own, but you really can't conduct meetings via email. That would be my only concern.
That's
Oh, no, I wasn't trying.
Not conduct a meeting, but I don't.
I was trying
just there shouldn't be, the business being conducted amongst the five of you via email. Obviously, you can have conversations and talk, but no determination.
Oh, no, I wasn't trying to do that.
Wait, all right, let's put it this way. So Monday, we're having another board meeting. We're having a workshop meeting on Monday.
Oh, somebody's got a lot of feedback.
Fred, can you?
Yeah. All right.
And
1 second.
so, I think that's better. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. So Monday, we're having a board meeting. We're having a workshop meeting Monday at 7. So whatever we're comfortable with this evening, we present to Mike. Mike makes those changes. Mike, you'll be able to make the changes over the weekend, and then we'll continue another session on Monday.
Yeah.
Is that reasonable?
Yeah, I'd also like to chime in. I spoke briefly to Mr. Magrino earlier, but I didn't really get some consensus. I believe that the $175,000 that has been set aside for outside legal work for the year, I think that's an excessive amount. I know that this was supposedly including the police negotiations. I would present or prefer, I would like to see that started this budget year and maybe continue into next budget year if necessary. But I'm not sure why we're budgeting essentially to do the entire kit and caboodle next year when the budget actually, when the police contract ends May 31st. I think that some of those negotiations need to start beginning right away. And I'd like to ask the mayor, how come they have not begun yet?
Well, we had those discussions already. I did already start discussions with the PBA president. And I did discuss this with Trustee Sauberman, and I did discuss it with Mr. Glickle also. So right now, they're not prepared to go to the table. We're currently reviewing the contracts. So I don't know if it's going to, if the negotiation will take place before June 1. I doubt it. And I would feel safer budgeting it into next year.
Do we really need $175,000 of legal costs to budget a new contract? I think that's.
I don't think that would fall under the entire contract negotiation, but Mr. Magrino can chime in on that.
Right. It wasn't just for that. It was,
No.
you know, based on, I was looking at prior years. You know, we had, you know, certainly an anomaly in 2020, 19 into 20, where it was basically 100,000 more than that.
Well, that was, there was a lawsuit that year.
Oh, absolutely. Right. But what I'm saying is,
I hate to interrupt, but I believe Chief Kaufer had a comment, and I believe he's about to head out. Jeremy?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we do.
Just a quick question on these 5% cuts for the sake of transparency. Can you please tell me what line you're planning on cutting 5% out of?
There was a variety that I submitted to the mayor and to the treasurer. I mean, I can forward you a copy of the email list. It's a very long list.
Okay, I just want to bring a point to some of my line items. My equipment line item, this current year compared to last year, I cut that by $14,000.
Okay, if you already cut it, then it wouldn't have shown up on my list.
No, but I'm just explaining to you why I have an increase of, I think, 2.3%, and that's to cover a $22,000 increase in radios.
Okay, I understand. Let me ask you this, and first of all, of course, we don't want to cut the radios. We already discussed that. But what is your, just give me a number, what is your category on the budget list? And I'll tell you how many or if any have applied to you. I don't think any of them do, honestly.
I'm 4,400.
3410.
3410. There is, okay, I see three items.
Okay.
So there was three items, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so I saw a telecommunications item, a computer cost item, and the radio repair maintenance, which we'll take off. We had 40,000 in for radio repair maintenance.
Telecommunications, what line is, that's the 002 line?
The 002.
That's the same as last year.
No, actually, oh, it is, but you only spent, so in past years, I was pointing out that you spent, let's say, 4890, then 3825, then we budgeted 6,500 last year, as you said, it's the same, but we've only spent 2151 to date. So I don't see why it needs to be 6,500 when you basically.
Mr. Genito, does that account for all the bills for this current fiscal year being up to date?
It may, but as I've explained to the trustees in the past, the year to date is not the end of the year. We get invoices in through June, July, and August that apply to as late as May. So in many of these things, the year to date spending doesn't necessarily reflect. I'll give you a good example. In my department, all of the software licenses, the majority of them come in at the end of May or early June, and that's when we actually pay them. So some of these lines, and as I've explained to all the trustees, when we look at them, it's good to look at a line, you say you have $6,500 in it, but then again, it doesn't necessarily mean that the bills haven't been processed yet.
I agree. So let me just chime in. On a $6,500 line item, 5% is $325. I honestly believe $325 will be negligible on your budget. I don't think you're going to notice that.
Okay, I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't see any of the telecommunication bills. Those are taken care of by the treasurer's office. So I don't know what that line is. The only thing I can tell you is every year during budget preparation season, I will contact Kathy Van Sickle and I will ask her what I have spent, and she will give me the average monthly, and I multiply that by 12, and that's how I come up with that number.
Okay. I'm only going by.
No, I
what I'm
understand that.
presented With, I'm being given prior years and current years, and then I went ahead and asked what year-to-date was, understanding it's not a full year, but in my mind, adding at least 10% to that number to get to full year. And again, if we're talking taking 5% off of something that's 6,500, we're only talking $325. It's technically peanuts, but you add all these little 300 here, 400 there up across a budget, and suddenly you've saved the residents, ultimately maybe $20,000, $30,000 collectively. I think
Trustee Alpert, I just have a question though. The 5% you're talking about, is that a 5% per department, or is that 5% every line?
5% of that line of the tentative budget line. So 5%
Of every line in the budget.
Individually, yes. So if a line is.
Well, see, now that doesn't make any sense whatsoever, because there are some lines they cannot cut even by 5%. And some of your largest numbers in here are insurance, are debt service. Those numbers have to be there. Retirement, those numbers have to be there. Those
Okay.
are a very big piece. Salaries, the same thing. If they're going to cut by 5%.
They weren't in the salaries weren't in my list. A lot of those things that you're describing weren't in my list. I didn't put those things in my list.
Oh, I understand that, but I would say that the better charge, if anything, to a department would be to say, please cut 5% of, here's the lines in your department I think are, that should be cut, and let them choose what lines can come up with that 5% dollar amount of the total.
I would prefer that, but I'm not getting cuts back. Like for instance, I spoke to the police chief and he said he doesn't have the experience to do it because this is his first budget.
Mr.
So I said,
Alpert,
well, if you're-
But
with due respect,
nobody.
nobody has asked me to cut anything until this meeting. So this is all new to me.
Okay.
We're starting to look in the wrong places here. We're starting once again in public safety. These are our volunteer firemen. Once again, we have police officers that we have to protect, our residents we have to protect. I don't know where you're going with this.
Okay, so Ed, calm yourself down. Fred, I'm sorry.
Calm yourself down.
Fred, you need to mute unless you have something to say. Sorry about that. So I think what we should do this evening is vote on what
Not
we
touch
agree.
public safety. Go ahead.
Fred, Ed, if you
Go ahead.
think anybody on this board.
That's what you were doing right now. You're cutting public safety.
No, we're
You're
not.
cutting
We're having
the
a
police
conversation.
vehicles and you're
We
cutting
are having a
volunteer fire
conversation.
department. Go ahead.
We are having a conversation. Don't mute yourself and stop laughing. As a mayor, you should present yourself a tad bit better.
Let us think of public safety and stop trying to speak over me. That's all I'm saying. Now move on.
Oh, let me mute you. Oh, okay, so the mayor is muted. So apparently the board members who are not muted and actually want to get something good done for the taxpayers of this village without serving any kind of harm to our village residents and or our public safety, which is of course number one in all of our minds. Do we wish to do something here? Board members?
Yes.
Okay, so what shall we do? Shall we turn around and say one car and we'll work with the fleet and try and figure that out and sell what we can? Oh, the mayor is now unmuted. And then we will cut the salaries for 6 months for safety zone.
For the two retirees, you mean?
Correct, the two
Yeah.
officers that are
Yes, I think
retiring.
we're all in agreement on that, on both of those. items.
Okay. And then we're not going to touch the fire department and we will gently look at the 5% and give Mike Genito enough time not to be doing this at the 9th hour.
Fine,
Do we all agree with that?
sure.
No.
Okay,
Well, it's Mayor, it's a board majority would rule, so.
Okay,
so-
Charlie, are you in
He
agreement
asked
with
it-
this?
She asked the question if you all agree, and I don't agree. So
Okay.
you're
Okay.
right. You're absolutely right. It's a majority. I don't agree. That's fine.
okay.
Agree.
Fred, you're going to have to unmute. And
Okay.
Ed, would you please take a vote for those items?
I agree. And
Do you want- First of all, I want clarification from Mr. Genito, once again, on his recommendation or his experience on not funding the police lines of people planning on retiring.
Well, we already got that. a few minutes
I need
Yes.
clarification on it.
No, you're just trying to keep
I'm
it. above
asking a
the tax.
question.
I understand. Mr.
I'm allowed
Genito
to ask
already
a question.
expressed-
You know that.
I
Mr.
understand, but
Genito,
Mr. Genito already expressed his
I-
negativity towards it.
I just want to confirm it.
No, you just want to pontificate.
Well, as I said before, in order to budget in a conservative manner, I'd never anticipate that someone is going to retire, even if they have every assurance that they will retire. And my years of experience has seen not just a few times, but many times when people have stated they have a retirement date and then they decide not to retire on that date, sometimes much later, sometimes well beyond the fiscal year.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so the board, you want to take a vote on the 6-month reduction in the 2 senior officer salaries?
Yes, please.
Yes.
Yes. Trustee Sauberman?
You're muted, Fred.
He gave a thumbs up. That's a yes.
I don't know if that's a yes. That's a
Fred,
yes.
you're
Yeah,
muted.
that
You're on mute.
qualifies.
Yeah,
Right?
yes,
Yes.
I say yes.
Okay, Steve?
Yes.
Yes, and Charles?
Yes.
Okay, so let the
You didn't
re,
say Joe Corrigan.
yes, Trustee Corrigan voted yes. Yes,
It's still nice to be asked.
yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Trustee Corrigan, how do you vote?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mr. Genito, the board, with the exception of myself, would like that done,
So Mayor, you're voting no.
and I vote no. Okay, next is the police vehicles. To enter into the police vehicles, the board chooses to add 1 new police car into the upcoming budget. Trustee
Yeah.
Corrigan?
Car a year.
One car a
Okay.
year.
Okay, 1 car a year, 1 car a
Every
year.
year.
Trustee Corrigan, did you say yes?
Yes, I did. Thank you for
Okay.
asking, Ed.
Trustee
Fred?
Sauberman?
Please unmute, Fred. Please unmute, Fred.
Fred, you have to unmute.
The thumbs up.
Let me just clarify for the public residents. This is
Fred,
actually,
you have to unmute.
we are looking to guarantee the police 1 new car every year, essentially forever. Well, for as long as certainly this board exists, but going forward, I think that's a good plan. And I think it hasn't happened in the past. There were many years where the police got 0 cars for a year. And I think that that's not safe. So we think that there should be a guarantee of a car every year. And that's how we'd like to see it.
You-
roll forward.
Fred, you okay with a car every year? You need to unmute and say yes.
No, Fred, you
need
have to unmute.
unmute and say yes.
You have to unmute, Fred.
Okay, I say yes.
All right.
Yes
there
to
we go.
1 car for this year. Okay.
Just to be clear,
Did I
you're
ask
just voting-
everyone?
No, Charles.
Mayor, just to be clear, you're only voting for this year. I understand that's a policy, but you can't say we guarantee 1 car a year.
Right, now, we're not, well, I'm not agreeing to that, but this year, we're looking at, the board is looking at 1 car
Correct,
this budget year.
correct.
It-
I
It's more
would
of a,
like,
it's more of a commitment than an actual vote. I just wanted that clear. that it's
right,
not-
it's a commitment into the budget that Michael will make the change. And
So,
I agree, I vote no to that.
Charles.
And I do think
Yeah.
that Steve was clear, as long as the board is in agreement, the police department should get that to rebuild the fleet.
The police department is looking for 2 cars for officer safety
I
and for the residents, Ms. Corrigan. And
I
you guys are voting for
understand that,
1.
Mr.
That's
Markunas.
all I'm saying.
And the
Okay.
I know.
residents-
You're
not
residents
getting a
can't
last
afford-
word.
The record has reflected that the board, consisting of Trustee Corrigan, Sauberman, Alpert, and Barone, voted for 1 car.
Correct,
1 new
That's
car,
it.
yes.
And
One
I
new car.
vote no.
yes.
I think they
that's
should
what-
have,
Now, for
I
the benefit-
believe the police department should have 2 new cars.
for the benefit of the public, we're talking for that one car, we're talking $60,000. This is not an ordinary issue car. This is a police issue car.
That's
with all
right.
the police upgrades. So I want to be clear that it's not like a small $15,000-$20,000 car that we're saying one. We're saying one of a very expensive $60,000 car.
To keep our offices and public safe. Yes, thank
Oh,
you.
you know what,
There you go.
Ed, we are not compromising.
Okay, go ahead. Don't. That's all right. We're moving on.
The police have
Good,
19
then stop
vehicles.
talking.
The police have 19 vehicles.
They're a disgrace.
All right, Steve, enough.
Okay, next. What was the next item? Was that it on the police?
Yes, it was.
Okay, and then I believe that you wanted to, I don't know where we stand with the 5% cut, Steve. Maybe you would like to.
Obviously, we can't cut anything that's, set in stone, anything that we actually know the exact amount, we can't cut. But I believe, it's my suspicion anyway, that the majority, I'd say probably 90% of the items I offered on that list are things where 5% would be a meaningful cut to the residents and an irrelevant cut for those line items. And it won't affect any purchasing that is normally done. I think it's just a signal in the right direction that we're looking out for the residents and looking out for the taxpayers, which I think is something that maybe in the past, some of the boards have chosen not to do. And that's why we've had large increases. I mean, just 3 years ago, Mayor, you proposed a 14% tax increase on the residents here. So, we basically, this board has been together in keeping the budget below the cap. We kept it below the cap last year. We're going to keep it below the cap this year. So we're doing right by the residents, and that's what we want to do. And that's what we want to keep doing. We're going to ensure that the budgets do not go up significantly.
Absolutely. And those increases were due to the fact of poor mismanagement of previous boards. Keep that in mind.
6
You want to
years.
reflect back.
Oh, I
Trustee
can.
Corrigan. You
I
can,
see.
Trustee Corrigan. I know you can reflect
That's
back
what I
on those
said.
years.
Yeah, and you were help. You were on the board as
Yep.
well, Ed, so
Yeah.
careful
Yeah.
what careful what stones you throw.
There you go. Go ahead. Okay,
So I guess for those cuts,
Well,
that
now
I'm
that.
proposing,
hang
we'll
on.
we'll have to go through them line by line. We'll have to go
all right,
through.
we'll go through them line by line, then make the final changes on Monday at Monday's board meeting.
So we're not.
Perfect.
on that, right?
Is that okay,
Yeah.
Mr. Genito? Will that be okay? You have the list, so, but, the other items I was discussing were the contingency, and I think, and the legal amounts. So do we have
Right.
any consensus on that?
I think Mr. Magrino was asking, speaking to those points. There he is.
As I mentioned, that was, one second. Sorry, as I mentioned, those numbers were based on what had occurred in the past. I discussed with Trustee Alpert, or I should say, we had a communication, and we can look at lowering some of those numbers, but the issue is with something like that, it's hard to tell how much would be needed because we just don't know. This past year, obviously, for every department, I'm sure, folks didn't know exactly what was coming up. We faced a lot of issues with personnel and,
Sure.
what to do, when folks were exposed or what to do when folks were, tested positive. So we have outside counsel. We do have the police negotiations coming up. So those are all items that were factored in my discussions with Mr. Genito, but absolutely we'll,
So
between
just to
now and
chime
Monday,
in,
we can look at it.
and I guess we have till Monday, but just to chime in on that and just things to consider is I would look at the numbers of what was spent during the last police negotiations, which occurred just prior to my joining the board in 2018. So that would be like basically fall of 2018, I believe is when the last police negotiations were done. So it would be good to compare the cost of that. And I understand it's going to cost money. I get it. I'm not sure if it's the amount that you earmarked. The other thing is that I personally, and I've said it before and I'll say it again, I don't think we need to have outside counsel on every board meeting and every workshop. I think we're spending essentially, let's just call it $1,000 a meeting on outside counsel at board meetings. That's not necessary. Okay. So I'd like to see that practice ended. And if necessary, I'm willing to float a resolution to this board to do so. Because I'm tired of seeing money get wasted. This is residents' money and it's being wasted on legal services that we don't need.
Right. I don't think a resolution is necessary. We'll, when I'll discuss with outside counsel, the times when we would need him to come on and, other items I could handle. There are certain times he has to be there, has to be on. Other times, if it's something he's handled, I can certainly, since I'm at the meeting in any event, can handle it.
It's just in the past, we never had labor council sitting in on meetings, and it was never
No,
necessary.
it was part of the cost with that exorbitant. We'll talk about that later.
Right, but I do want to see that. That's a line item I want to see adjusted. And the other line item I'd like to discuss among the board is the contingency. I touched on it before. We did cut it last year from $200,000 to $100,000, and we didn't even spend any of that. I understand, I'd like to keep it at a minimum of 100, but I'd like to add to that the actual cost that we might anticipate in the new police contract having to pay out that year for salary increases. So I think basically just again, making a random number, if that was $50,000, then the contingency should be 150, but I don't believe it should be 200. Do I have whatever that number is? And that would be up to Mr. Genito. Do I have any consensus with the rest of the board on the contingency?
Yes.
Trustee, if I may, it is not up to me to determine how much the board is going to put in for police negotiations. I will give you two things to consider. Number one, if you base your contingent amount on what you believe you wish to offer the PBA in the contract, well, then why not just give it to them? Why even bother with a negotiation? Because you're going to have it right out there.
That's why I'm not.
So we'll start with that. The second thing is I have no idea what the board is desiring in the police contract or the police for that matter. And it's all up in the air to determine based on salary increases, rates for special pay, all that sort of thing.
Right, but you could probably at least advise the board what it has cost in the past, additional on top of previous contracts for a typical contract.
Well, the board is fully aware of that. They, not that long ago, gave the retroactive pay to the police officers on their PBA contract that was settled out, about a year ago?
Yes, but that retro was several years worth of retro. It wasn't, I'm hoping that we can complete the contract quickly and we won't have like 4 years of retro pay to deal with.
Understood, but I did give the board year by year what the retro amount was, even though we ended up paying it out in a lump sum in 2 payments to the police officers. But the board is aware of what it costs. And honestly speaking, I mean, if you don't change anything else in the contract and you just take the total salaries of the police and multiply that by a percentage, it gives you an idea of, if you have $4 million of salaries and 1%, you know how much that's equivalent to.
Sure, that's true. Thank you. That's the kind of advice I was looking for. Again, I was picking random number. So, yeah, very good. But does the board have any consensus on the amount for the contingency? Joe, Charlie?
I was thinking we could possibly think about 150 to 175. I would like to know about approximately if we do the budget and sorry, Mike, I did not go back and look at last year's. So that is something definitely we'll look at.
Okay,
So I guess we'll have that by Monday then.
by Monday.
Okay.
Okay, is there anything further?
Fred, do you have anything? Is there anything you'd like to present?
I like the idea of a compromise number of 175,000 contingency fund.
Okay.
Charlie, anything from you on
I'm
that?
okay with 175 compromise.
Okay,
Yes, I am as well.
then I'll go with that. Let's just say 175, Mr. Genito.
Okay.
So we don't have to wait till Monday on that one. Look, I'm
So
fine with
that's
that.
175 in the general
Contingency.
fund?
General fund contingency instead of 200. Last year we had 100, we've spent 0. So we're setting aside 175, which gives us some cushion if there's any surprise with new salaries, things like that.
Is there a vote, Mayor?
I vote no. Okay, so trustee Corrigan, you vote Your vote?
I would like to vote yes. Thank you, Ed.
Okay. For trustee Sauberman,
I vote yes.
okay. Trustee Alpert
I vote yes.
and trustee Barone.
I vote yes.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any further?
So it sounds like,
So the public is also aware that the contingency fund is critical to the emergency operations of the village, any tax certs, any unforeseen issues that may arise in our infrastructure or anywhere within the village. That's something, that's another cushion that is necessary and needed for the safe operation of the village.
just to
okay.
counteract the mayor for a moment, if I may. It should also be, the public should also be aware what's not listed in the budget, which I don't know why it generally is not listed in the budget, because I think it should be. The village also has a significant amount of taxpayer dollars in what's called a fund balance. The fund balance is what's left over each year after money is unspent from a previous budget. Now, we all know that the village went nearly bankrupt about 6, 7 years ago, 8 years ago, whatever that was. But since then, Mr. Genito has done a fantastic job of righting the ship because it was going the wrong way and falling off a cliff. But it's been going the right way ever since Mr. Genito took over the budgeting. So I want to thank you for that, number one. Number two, the village has built up a substantial, in my opinion, substantial fund balance, including all the different funds. I believe it was close to $8 million, but the general fund alone was in the range of $3 million. So this is a big cushion in the event of some unforeseen emergency. We're building a contingency for like the little things, but really that's just money that if it's unspent, it ends up going into the fund balance. So my opinion is that the contingency should be sufficient to handle any of the wiggle room, but not excessive to put a burden on the taxpayer, because eventually at the end of the year, that's just going to go into the fund balance, which is already about $3 million of your tax dollars. So my opinion is the village has a cushion. So the mayor is implying we don't have a cushion and that we're putting the village in harm's way. We are not. The village has a large cushion at this point.
According to the mayor, we're setting the village up for doom and gloom, but we're just worried about the taxpayers and doing the right thing.
That's all you're worried about. I'm worried about the taxpayers also. I'm more worried about the staff too, and the policemen and the volunteer firemen. So.
Oh, really?
Let's put it there. Joe, that's what you keep,
Ed,
Joe.
stop
Again,
it.
that is what you keep saying, and we must reiterate. We are here for the taxpayer, but we also need to protect the volunteer firemen and the police officers. Bottom line, the fund balance is the main purpose. You have the email from the treasurer. The fund balance's main purpose is to provide a cushion against financial emergencies where the village may be hit with significant unexpected expenditures and or significant reductions or delays in estimated revenues. I will go on. We are not even at the recommended level of 35% to have a safe fund balance. We are only at the 23% of our fund balance, where we should be at 35%.
It depends what experts you ask. Some experts will say 20% is sufficient, and we are over that number.
We have the expert that we employ here. His name is Mr. Genito, and based upon his recommendation, this is the way we operate. You just said what a great job he does. Excuse me.
He does do a great job.
And he is making the
recommendation
to keep this fund balance strong and healthy for the fiscal strength of this village.
Mayor, please stop.
I'm speaking. I am speaking. I'm not. I am allowed to
You're pontificating. What you're doing is pontificating.
That's what you were doing, Mr. Alpert. Excuse me. This is not right. I have the floor. I am speaking. The fund balance, based upon Mr. Genito's email, please read it.
I did.
Okay, so you're disagreeing with him.
Maybe on this item I am.
You are. Okay.
Okay, so there is going to be one last comment this evening, and then I think we should vote to close the meeting whenever Ed, I'm muted again from Ed. Okay, so absolutely no way.
What are you talking about? You're not muted.
No, you're muted.
I am letting you speak without any background interference. That's what you do.
Oh, thank you, Ed. Okay, so there is no way this board would ever jeopardize one single emergency management person or police officer, fire department, ambulance driver. I find it a personal insult when my family does this on a regular basis. So I hold a large disagree with you on that, Ed. And you cannot accuse us of not taking care of our essential first responders or any employee in the village of Suffern. And that will be the end of this. You do not get the last word on that. It is incorrect.
I do want to add,
Put
we
in
might
for
want to
the
open the
second-
floor.
Put in for the second police car.
We might want to open the floor to the residents. I don't know if any have their, if any know that they want to talk, but I see that there are a lot of people. that
No,
are-
this is, we're not having, this is a meeting amongst the board
Okay, that's fine.
and the
Okay, fine.
department heads.
So close the meeting, Ed.
All right, so let it be said, the mayor doesn't want to accept public input here. So that's
Oh, my God, you guys.
All right, just let's,
I see the PBA president raising his hand.
I see that too, actually.
So let the PBA president speak. Mr. Genito, this is a disgrace.
yes, you are, Ed.
I see Billy Samora raising his hand, Mr. Genito.
Yes.
He's the
in
PBA president.
Yes, he can speak now if he wishes.
Thank you.
Good evening, members of the board. Can everyone hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
And
I apologize for my delay in entering the meeting. I'm actually down at the Air Force Base performing some military duty today, but I felt compelled to speak on the matter of the police cars. And I just want to say for the record, I know I've introduced myself before, but for any village residents or any people that are listening that are not familiar with me, not only am I the PBA president, but I am a village resident as well. So I'm not just speaking as a labor leader, I'm speaking as someone that lives in the village and cares about it. Prior to becoming a police officer with the Village of Suffern Police Department, I was a paramedic for 5 years, and I worked for Rockland Paramedic Services. And for the board members that don't know, the paramedic unit that covers our agency's area also serves a number of other areas. So it's entirely possible that the paramedic unit responding to a call in the Village of Suffern could be coming from Sloatsburg. I've done it before when I was a paramedic before I put on the police uniform, or from Spring Valley, or from any number of places that are not our 2.2 square mile village. So not only are we responding for calls that are what people typically think of a police officer going to, a domestic incident, a possible intoxicated driver, an erratic driver, a bar fight, something like that. We are going to medical calls. We're going to drug overdose calls. We're going to cardiac arrests. And our vehicles are counted on to be that first response, to be that there in a moment's notice. And I can also say from experience that some of the vehicles, they are not in good condition. And it's not because we don't take care of them. It's not because we don't have a stellar DPW. It's because those high engine idle times, the speeds that we have to travel at to get to those calls I was describing, it wears on the vehicles. I don't know how much clearer I could say it. It is a public safety hazard for us to not have vehicles that are adequate to do the jobs that we're called upon to do. So I wanted to share that because I don't know what the chief said because like I said, I'm down here and I couldn't get on, but I want to give you guys a picture that's something a little different than just what people picture law enforcement doing. I can say this year, I've responded to more than a handful of drug overdose calls and unfortunately a cardiac arrest. If we're not there in a moment's notice, that is a issue for our residents.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Officer Samora, and thank you for your service to our country, and thank you for getting on. Okay. Motion to close.
there's a
Motion.
hand on Michael's iPad.
Motion to close.
Motion to close.
We got a Michael's iPad hand raised.
It's an old public comment this evening. Motion to close the meeting. Motion to close the meeting.
Why is there no public comment? We don't
It wasn't on
understand.
the agenda. This is a meeting of the Board of Trustees to discuss the final budget determinations.
This is the first time we've had a budget meeting without public input.
Not on the final determinations.
I think we should allow the public to chime in.
Okay, you want the public to chime in? Whose hand is raised?
Michael Curley.
Oh, Michael Curley. Okay. Okay, let Mr. Curley speak.
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
There
Yeah,
you go, yeah.
Okay, I guess I've been listening to the whole meeting and I see we all have agreement on one issue, that everybody thinks Mike Genito is doing a fantastic job, which is great to hear. I just wish you wouldn't keep telling him that. He might price us out of the market. We may lose him. Okay, so keep that a little quieter. But I think as I listen to the meeting and I respect Mike Genito's opinion greatly, but it appears we have two police officers that are leaving, are going to retire very shortly. And I know we put in a budget for 6 months, but the reality is the word that they're retiring is not months and months away, but within 30 to 60 days. So the actual savings will not be the 67,000 that you got there, but it'll actually be 130 something thousand, another 67 actually. So you actually, at that point, the board can then revisit the issue, because once the taxes are assessed, they're assessed. But you may end up with another $67,000. You then, as a board, can assess, okay, should we work on the police cars? And I would recommend getting an outside person to look at the cars and tell us what's the damage, what shape they're in. Then all working together, you could consider, at this point, you made your decision, one police car. And I think you're doing what you feel you have to do to protect the taxpayers. But there may be another 60 something thousand dollars there, because they're talking about it could be 70 to 100,000 to fix them. Now, I had a lot of faith in our past chief, Clerk Osborne, and he got no police cars or one police cars. And I think he did a damn good job, and I respect him. And I'm not going to try to look back and judge him. So if you want to make a commitment, but if you're going to have the extra money coming up down the road, you can decide when you get actually an outsider. I would get an outside mechanic to look at all the cars and say, okay, what do we really need? Who's an expert in police cars? Because the DPW seems that that's not their expertise. Okay, because it's a different kind of vehicle. So then you can, but right now you made your choice, and I think that's fine. Okay, because the taxpayers are hurting this village and people are moving out. And it's getting tougher and tougher. I support the police department now, and I've always supported the police department. You go back years and watch the meetings and my opinions. And I still think that this board, all this board supports the police department. But if you look at last year's, there was money left over last year. It goes into the fund balance. And because you guys did a responsible budget last year, and I'm sure you're going to do a responsible budget this year also. But the people do need savings and people need help. But it doesn't mean you can't look at this at a later date and revisit an issue, because there may be extra money in all these other things. So I think you've made the right decision. But I think you'll be able to there will be money. I feel comfortable, and I'll make a prediction. I feel those officers will retire before 6 months, and there'll be extra savings. And I think that savings will be higher than most people think, even though I respect the treasurer's opinion. I think in this situation, I think there are people that are ready to go. They've done a great job for this community. I want to respect them, and I'm not gonna. They've done a great job. Okay, we were lucky to have them. But I think keeping down below the tax cap and keeping low in the air is a priority. All right. I've always felt the fire department has always kept their budget in a good position, in a safe position, and never tried to hurt the taxpayers. They've always done it with safety and caring and responsibility. And I think they're doing that again. Okay. So just to keep in mind with that, with the fire department, but there will be times that this board can revisit issues. So just keep that in mind. So I don't, if it came and we were 7 months down the road and all of a sudden, geez, this is broken down and this is that, there is no one on this board that's not going to find the money to help them. Last year, after we did the budget, we had to come up with another 70 or 80,000 for an employee that had back pay coming. So we've always been responsible in having enough money there. So I just want to thank everyone and have a nice day. Oh, and one more thing, on Saturday, I'm having a fundraiser for the Michael Augustin family. I'm doing it with the CSEA and the DPW. It's from 12 to 4, sponsored by Curly's Corner. And I've been up there working today, and we should have a lot of people. So I invite everyone to come, and it's only $10. You get all kinds of food and all kinds of things. And thank you for letting me speak. Have a nice day.
Thank you. Okay. Motion to close.
Motion, trustee Alpert.
Trustee Alpert. Second,
Second, trustee Barone.
trustee Barone. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. See you Monday.
Good Monday.